Alone with the rest of us. Matt looked between his friends, a mixture of confusion and relief flooding over him. The light in this new area was almost blinding after the oppressive darkness of the swamp, and it took him a moment to focus. The colors were brighter, the air less thick with the ghostly fog, but something about the brightness felt wrong, like it was too vibrant, too sharp. What happened? Matt asked, his voice trembling slightly. You've been wandering around in there, Becky said, her brow furrowed in concern. We were worried about you. When we got separated, we thought we lost you for good. I was right behind you guys, Matt protested, still disoriented. You ran off and I thought I'd find you in the next room. But then what? Becky urged, her eyes wide. Matt hesitated. There was a voice. It called my name. Dude, you just got spooked, Dave said, shaking his head dismissively. Haunted house and all that. Let's get out of here before the next round of freaky stuff starts. But as he spoke, Matt couldn't shake the lingering sense of dread that clung to him. He felt the pull of something dark beneath the surface, like a thread he couldn't quite grasp. No, you don't understand. I saw something. Something big and twisted. It wanted me to join it. James's expression shifted, turning serious. Matt, we were all scared back there. It's just part of the experience. Look, let's just keep moving. The group moved on, but Matt felt a weight of unspoken tension between them. The air shifted around him as they walked, a cool draft flowing through the hallway, stirring the vibrant colors around them. It was as if the brightness had a life of its own, pulsing and throbbing in sync with his heartbeat. As they entered another room, the decor changed completely. Gone were the spooky animatronics and dark corners. Instead, they stood in a space filled with mock trees and eerie glowing plants that resembled the swamp he had just left. The ground was now carpeted in soft moss, which felt wrong underfoot, too inviting, too alive. Look at this place, Becky said, taking a step forward. It's beautiful. It's creepy, Matt replied. It feels like it's watching us. Quit being a downer, James said. Just enjoy the vibe. But Matt couldn't shake the feeling of being observed. He scanned the area, trying to shake off the unease. A flicker of movement caught his eye and he turned quickly, but there was nothing there, just shadows playing tricks in the light. See? Dave said, patting Matt on the shoulder. You're just seeing things now. Let's check out what's next. As they moved deeper into the room, the atmosphere shifted again, the glow of the plants becoming more intense, almost hypnotic. Matt felt a pull toward them as if they were calling him closer, but he resisted. He didn't want to be alone again, even if it was just the five of them in this strange, shifting world. Suddenly, Matt heard it again. The voice whispered through the foliage, silky and enticing, "Join us, Matt." "Guys," he called out, his voice wavering. "Did you hear that?" "Hear what?" Becky replied, a note of frustration creeping into her voice. "Nothing, never mind," he said, swallowing hard. They continued walking, but Matt felt the tendrils of unease creeping up his spine. The walls seemed to pulse, and the shadows elongated as the lights flickered in time with his racing heart. And then it happened. One of the glowing plants reached out, a vine-like appendage wrapping around Matt's wrist. He yanked his arm back, panic rising in his chest. "Get it off me," he yelled. "Matt, what are you talking about?" James shouted, eyes wide with concern. But the vine tightened, pulling him toward the plant. The air filled with an intoxicating scent, something sweet yet musky, and Matt felt a strange compulsion to follow it. "Help!" he screamed as he struggled, but his friends were frozen in place, staring in horror. The glowing plant pulsed rhythmically, and he could hear the voice again, now all around him. "You can be with us forever, Matt. You will never be alone again." Matt fought against the vine, but it was too strong. He could feel himself being pulled deeper into the center of the glowing foliage. "Don't let it take me," he shouted, looking desperately at his friends. "Help me." Suddenly, the ground beneath him shifted, and he stumbled forward, breaking free from the vine's grip. He landed hard on the mossy ground, but he didn't stop. He scrambled to his feet and bolted, not looking back as the whispers intensified behind him. "Matt, wait!" James shouted, breaking free from his shock and sprinting after him. "Don't!" Matt cried, but it was too late. The glow intensified, filling the room with a blinding light, and he could hear the murmurs of the plants wrapping around him once again. "Join us," the voice called, and for a moment he felt a sense of belonging he hadn't felt in years. But as he turned to look back, his friends were right behind him, their faces painted with fear and concern. Matt realized he couldn't leave them behind, even for the comfort of the unknown. He felt the vine pulling him, but he pushed back with everything he had. "I'm not alone," he yelled, his voice ringing through the eerie quiet that followed. The lights flickered again and the pull of the plants weakened. Matt stumbled forward and to his shock he found himself crashing into his friends. They wrapped their arms around him, creating a barrier against the encroaching darkness. The voice from the plants howled, a chilling sound that echoed through the chamber, shaking the very ground beneath them. "You will regret this," it hissed, the lights flickering one last time before plunging the room into darkness. Together they moved as one, stumbling through the shadows, seeking an exit. Matt felt the warmth of his friends beside him, the familiar presence grounding him as the world around them pulsed and writhed. "Keep moving," Becky urged, her voice fierce despite the fear lacing her words. "We'll find a way out together." With each step, Matt felt the bond they shared becoming stronger, pushing back against the darkness that sought to consume him. The whispers faded as they pressed on, finally breaking through into a corridor bathed in pale moonlight. They emerged into the night, the haunted house behind them growing silent. The cool air felt refreshing against their skin, and as they turned to look back, they could see the flickering lights of the attraction dimming, the haunted house falling silent. "Are we free?" Matt gasped, panting heavily. "For now," James said, but Matt could see the uncertainty in his friend's eyes. "But what was that place?" Matt took a deep breath, his heart still racing but feeling lighter now that they were outside. "I don't know," he admitted. "But whatever it was, we faced it together." As they walked away from the haunted house, a sense of unity settled among them, a promise that they wouldn't let each other slip away again. But deep down, Matt couldn't shake the feeling that the darkness they encountered was still lurking, waiting for its next chance to pull them into its depths. "Next year, let's skip the haunted houses," Matt said, trying to lighten the mood as they reached the parking lot. "Agreed," Becky chuckled, but the tension in her laughter told Matt she wasn't entirely convinced. As they piled into James's car, the laughter began to flow, but Matt couldn't help glancing back at the haunted house, its silhouette dark against the moonlit sky. "Just remember," he said quietly, "we've got each other. No matter what." And with that, they drove off into the night, ready to face whatever came next together, even as the haunted whispers faded into the distance, leaving the ghosts of Halloween behind them for another year. The real story behind John Carpenter's Halloween. You know the movie Halloween, the iconic horror film with Jamie Lee Curtis, where her character, Laurie Strode, faces off against her deranged brother, Michael Myers. The film unfolds in a small town in Illinois named Haddonfield, where Michael Myers goes on a killing spree after escaping from a mental institution. But what if I told you that the town of Haddonfield was based on my hometown, and the story is even more real than most people know? Laurie, who is Michael's younger sister in the film, ends up being adopted by the Strode family. "This is a real family living right here in my town, owners of a furniture store in the downtown square, their legacy woven into the fabric of the community." Back in 1963, when the nightmare began with Michael killing his older sister, who was supposed to be babysitting, Haddonfield, a quaint farming town approximately 50 miles from Chicago, was a sleepy place where everyone knew one another. The Strode family had deep roots in the area. Morgan, Laurie's adoptive father, had worked as a realtor for many years, while his brother James owned the furniture store that his son, Mark, still operates today. On that fateful Halloween night in 1963, as the story goes, Michael Myers, whose real identity John Carpenter shrouded in mystery, indeed committed the gruesome act of killing his sister by stabbing her multiple times with a kitchen knife. However, that was just the beginning. When his parents returned home to the horror of finding their daughter dead, Michael wasn't waiting outside. Instead, he was hiding under his little sister's bed. As his mother entered the room to check on Laurie, Michael emerged, slashing at her ankles before brutally cutting her throat as she fell. Meanwhile, his father, completely unaware of the unfolding horror, was downstairs on the phone with the police, oblivious to his impending doom. The 6-year-old Michael, a picture of innocence turned nightmare, emerged from the shadows, delivering a lethal blow to his father as he stood distracted, gazing out the back window. When the police finally arrived, they found Michael standing over his sister's lifeless body, the bloody knife still gripped tightly in his tiny fist. The officers on the scene that night were deeply traumatized, their minds forever haunted by the images they witnessed. Many required years of therapy, unable to articulate the horror that they had seen, blocked by the shock of the experience. The next day, Morgan and his wife Pamela were called to the police station to pick up little Laurie, who had spent the night in the care of a compassionate dispatch worker, blissfully unaware of the tragedy that had befallen her family. Adoption for Laurie was expedited due to the lack of any other family the state could locate. The Myers family was shattered beyond repair after Michael's brutal attack. As Laurie grew up in her new home, the town continued to feel the repercussions of that Halloween night. The Strode family, despite their dark history, became pillars of the community. Their furniture store thrived, and they maintained a semblance of normalcy, always carrying the weight of their tragic story. But when Lori graduated high school and went off to college, she seemingly vanished from the community, leaving a cloud of uncertainty behind her. The Strodes maintained that she was alive and well, opting for a life away from the public eye, but the truth of her fate remained a mystery. Local legends tell a different story, whispering about the true origins of Michael Myers. After his escape from the Elgin Mental Health Center in 1978, where he had been held for many years, he was deemed untreatable by the age of 21 and was transferred to a more secure facility. There are rumors that he was sent to Joliet Prison, a facility known for housing some of the most dangerous inmates in Illinois. The chilling question remains: if Joliet Prison is no longer operational, where is Michael Myers now? While some locals speculate he might still be locked up within the crumbling walls of the old prison, there are no official records to support this theory. The fate of Michael Myers became a ghost story whispered among residents, echoing through the town like a lingering shadow. The absence of records surrounding Myers's incarceration fuels conspiracy theories. Some believe that during the prison's closing, a small group of prisoners went missing, their records conveniently erased to avoid scrutiny. Perhaps the authorities lost track of them, not wanting the liability of a criminal like Michael Myers resurfacing. With no way to trace his history, the very thought of such a psychopath potentially roaming free is enough to send shivers down one's spine. As Halloween approaches each year, the town embraces its dark past, holding events that draw thrill seekers and horror enthusiasts. But for those of us who grew up here, the legend of Michael Myers is not just a tale of fiction. It intertwines with our reality, a reminder that the shadows of the past are not easily forgotten. Some residents have even claimed to witness strange occurrences that seem linked to the Myers legacy. Reports of unexplained noises in the woods surrounding the old Strode house, sightings of a shadowy figure lurking near the furniture store, and other eerie happenings fuel the local lore. One elderly resident swears she heard a child's laughter echoing through the trees on a dark Halloween night, sending chills down her spine. As I walk through the town, I see the remnants of that past etched into the very streets and buildings. The furniture store, with its creaky wooden floors and faded photographs of the Strode family, feels haunted by memories that refuse to fade. I often wonder how much of this story has been shaped by Carpenter's film, and how much of it is rooted in the truth that we, the residents of Haddonfield, carry with us. While Carpenter may have chosen to mask the true identities behind his characters, the Strode family remains a very real part of our town's history. Their resilience, intertwined with the tragic events of that Halloween night, speaks to the complexities of survival and the burden of memory. As we gather every October to celebrate Halloween, the lines between fiction and reality blur, leaving us to ponder the chilling possibility that the ghosts of our past may still be lurking just out of sight. Whether Laurie Strode exists in anonymity or Michael Myers is still hidden in the shadows, the echoes of their story resonate within our town, a reminder that sometimes truth is stranger and more terrifying than fiction. As the years rolled on, the legacy of that tragic Halloween night became a focal point for local lore, and the town of Haddonfield transformed into a curious blend of nostalgia and horror. Every year, residents would gather for the Halloween festival, a celebration that served as both a tribute to the past and a way to reclaim the town's identity from its grim history. The streets would fill with children in costumes, laughter mingling with the faint echo of an unsettling past. Yet, behind the masks and cheerful decorations, there lingered an unspoken tension, as if the shadows of what happened decades ago were still watching, waiting. The Strode family remained fixtures in the community. Morgan and Pamela grew older, their faces lined with the wisdom of years, but their eyes held a sadness that could never fully fade. They often opened their doors to local events, sharing stories about their life with Laurie. Some townsfolk speculated that they were in touch with her, sharing occasional updates that kept hope alive for the Strodes. However, others whispered about the darker aspects of their history, hinting that they were trying to atone for the sins of the past. Mark, the couple's son, took over the family furniture store after his father's retirement, yet he was burdened with the weight of expectation and the need to honor the family legacy. He often heard stories from the older residents, tales that had grown into legends over time. Some would recount how Michael's name still sent chills down their spines, while others described encounters that seemed to connect them to the past. Mark listened intently, both fascinated and horrified by the haunting legacy of his family's past. After light. Log 1. Have you ever wondered, what happens after light? or afterlife, whatever you call it. I haven't experienced it yet, of course, since I'm writing this. Or have I? I can only recall what I have seen, what I have heard, and what I have been told. It was the day that my father died. It was caused by sudden cardiac arrest when we were out having a stroll in the park. I remember him saying that there's a light. He died in my arms, smiling. He died. He died in my arms, smiling. The next 2 days were just silence. I never said anything to my relatives, to my friends, and to my mother. All I could hear ringing inside my ears were his final words. There's a light. What could it possibly mean? That's what I thought. I pondered how he could see a light where the only light he could have seen was the sun's. I was intrigued. I was interested. I looked into it more. I experimented. That light my father mentioned in his final words wasn't the afterlife, because I experimented. I kidnapped children. I killed children. I asked them what they saw, but they didn't respond. They were dead. My hands are stained with innocent blood. So I stopped hunting. I started experimenting on adults. I kidnapped a young lady. I opened her stomach. I did horrible things. I asked the same question, what do you see? They never answered. I was so intrigued. My name is Jacob Crest, 31 years old. I am currently writing this as I am to be executed via the electric chair. This will be my first time experiencing the light. Log 1 end. Log 2. The person who is writing this is an officer of the law. Today, 9:45 a.m. Jacob Crest, with a kill count of 15, has finally been executed via electric chair. His final request was to write down his final words. But he never said anything. Log 2 end. Log 3. They say the execution process is swift, but I found myself lingering in the moments before Jacob Crest's death. I had been part of the investigative team that caught him. His chilling ability to manipulate and charm drew people into his web, and it was only after discovering the bodies that the horror truly set in. As I prepared the paperwork for his execution, a knot formed in my stomach. His chilling words lingered with me, there's a light. What kind of man finds solace in such darkness? The state had announced the execution weeks in advance. Many gathered outside the prison, some to protest, others to witness. For the families of his victims, it was a closure they had long awaited. I couldn't help but feel a mixture of sympathy for them and disdain for Jacob. He had stolen lives, extinguished the light of so many, and yet here he was, writing about his thoughts as if they held any weight in the world. In the execution chamber, I stood off to the side, watching as Jacob was strapped into the chair. His eyes, once filled with a twisted sense of wonder, now appeared hollow, resigned. The guards prepared the equipment, and I noticed his hands tremble slightly, perhaps fear finally gripping him. When they asked if he had any last words, he just shook his head, a mere shadow of the man who once reveled in the act of taking lives. As the switch was pulled and the electricity surged through him, I looked away, unwilling to witness the death throes of a man who had committed unspeakable acts. Log 3 and Log 4. After the execution, the aftermath weighed heavily on me. I spent days replaying everything in my mind, from the moment we discovered the first body to the night of his execution. Each victim, each family member who cried out for justice. It was a heavy burden to bear. One evening, as I sat in my darkened office reviewing case files, I came across an old report detailing Jacob's childhood. His father had died young, much like my own father. Perhaps that was where the parallels ended, but it was striking. There were whispers of abuse, neglect, and a history of psychological instability. The light Jacob sought might have stemmed from a desperate need for approval, for meaning in a world that had given him none. Days turned into weeks, and I couldn't shake the nagging thought that there was more to Jacob's story, something that might explain his descent into madness. I began researching, looking into his past, seeking out those who knew him before the horror began. I spoke to his childhood friends, former teachers, and neighbors, piecing together a portrait of a young boy who once laughed and played. They described him as intelligent but troubled, a bright spark dimmed by his circumstances. He always talked about wanting to understand death, one classmate recalled, shaking his head in disbelief. We thought he was just curious, but it was like he was obsessed. Log 4 and Log 5. My investigation led me to a small library in Jacob's hometown, where I uncovered more about his life. Old articles described a boy who often sat alone in the playground, staring at the horizon as if searching for something just out of reach. It was heartbreaking to think of how he had transformed from a curious child into a monster. As I dug deeper, I learned of a psychological evaluation he underwent as a teenager. The report mentioned dark thoughts and an unsettling fascination with mortality. Jacob had once been a promising student, but his interests twisted into something dark. It was in those pages that I found mention of his father's death, how it had impacted him, igniting a fire within that would never be quenched. Jacob believed his father was watching over him, the report stated. He often spoke of a light that guided him, a light he sought to understand. It is this fixation that may have led him down a darker path. The light his father spoke of was perhaps a guiding force in his life, a beacon that became warped over time. The deeper I dug, the more I began to see Jacob not just as a monster but as a broken man. A man whose quest for understanding turned into something horrific. Log 5 and Log 6. Haunted by these revelations, I returned to the prison, desperate to understand Jacob's mindset. I requested an interview, hoping to glean something, anything, that might explain the unexplainable. After some persuasion, they agreed, and I found myself standing before him one last time. Jacob looked different now, a mere shell of the man he once was. His eyes held a flicker of recognition when I entered, but it was fleeting. "Why did you do it, Jacob?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "What were you hoping to find?" He smiled faintly, a shadow of his former self. "You know, they never really understood," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I just wanted to know if the light was real. If I could find it, I could bring them back." His words sent chills down my spine. He spoke of the victims like they were pawns in his game, tools in his quest for knowledge. It was unsettling to hear him articulate his twisted logic. "What do you think happens after we die?" I pressed, searching for clarity in the chaos of his mind. He stared past me, his gaze unfocused, as if peering into another realm. I think there's something out there. Something waiting. I just wanted to help them see it." "Help them? By killing them?" He chuckled softly, a sound devoid of humor. "They didn't see it. None of them did. But they will now. When the light comes, they'll understand." I felt a shiver run through me. He had rationalized his actions in such a grotesque manner, convincing himself that he was doing them a service. As I left the room, I couldn't shake the feeling that Jacob had crossed a threshold into madness, a place where reason no longer held sway and darkness reigned supreme. Log 6 and Log 7. The days that followed Jacob's execution became a blur of news reports, discussions, and debates about his crimes. His story had captivated the nation, and his name became synonymous with horror. But my mind remained fixated on the light, the very thing that had driven him to commit unspeakable acts. I began to think about the nature of light itself. It can be illuminating, revealing truths, or it can be blinding, obscuring reality. I sought out experts in psychology, philosophy, and even the paranormal, hoping to find insight into Jacob's obsession. Conversations filled with speculation and theories only fueled my determination to understand. What is the afterlife? Is there truly a light awaiting us? Or is it merely a comforting illusion we tell ourselves in the face of death? One night, while poring over research papers, I stumbled upon a group that studied near-death experiences. Their findings suggested a common theme. Many who had brushes with death reported seeing a light, a sense of peace, and a connection to something greater. Could Jacob have truly believed he was helping others see this light? Was it a reflection of his desire to reunite with his father, or had he lost all touch with humanity? These questions consumed me, and the more I learned, the more unsettled I became. Perhaps the light wasn't just a figment of his imagination but rather an embodiment of his hope, a hope twisted by tragedy. Log 7 and Log 8. As months passed, I found myself drawn into a world of obsession similar to Jacob's. I began to journal my thoughts, documenting my quest to understand the nature of the light. I visited graveyards, spoke with mediums, and attended workshops on spirituality, hoping to catch a glimpse of what lay beyond. Each encounter deepened my intrigue. I listened to stories of those who claimed to have seen the light, tales of peace and love that transcended earthly struggles. But in the back of my mind, Jacob's darkness loomed large. One night, as I sat alone in my office, surrounded by candlelight, I had a sudden impulse to reach out to Jacob's family. I found myself compelled to understand their grief and how they had navigated the aftermath of his horrific acts. After a few tense phone calls, I arranged to meet Jacob's mother, a woman whose life had been shattered by her son's choices. She welcomed me into her home, a modest space filled with photographs of a happier time. As she spoke of Jacob, her voice trembled. "He was such a bright child," she said, tears glistening in her eyes. "But I lost him somewhere along the way. I often wonder what happened to the boy I knew. Did I fail him? Was there something I could have done?" Her grief resonated deeply within me. I had only seen Jacob as a monster, but to her, he was still her son, a son who had become a stranger. Did he ever talk about the light? I asked gently, hoping to bridge the gap between her memories and the horror that had unfolded. She nodded slowly, lost in thought. He used to say there was something beautiful waiting for him. I thought it was just childhood imagination, but now, her voice trailed off, burdened by the weight of her sorrow. As I left her home, I felt a profound sense of responsibility to share her story, both the tragedy of Jacob's actions and the heartbreak of a mother left to mourn a lost child. Log 9. With each passing day, my investigation morphed from an obsession with Jacob Crest into a quest for understanding the human experience of life, death, and what lies beyond. I started to compile my findings into a manuscript, a narrative that combined the darkness of Jacob's story with the hope that so many others had found. In the final chapters, I included testimonies from individuals who had near-death experiences, those who spoke of the overwhelming love they felt, the warmth of the light that enveloped them, and the sense of peace that followed. I contrasted these with the chilling reality of Jacob's path, revealing the duality of human existence. I also highlighted Jacob's mother's perspective, weaving her grief into the narrative to paint a fuller picture of the impact his choices had on those left behind. I wanted to honor not only the victims but also the complexity of life itself, the moments of joy overshadowed by tragedy, the light hidden within darkness. As I typed the final words, I felt a sense of closure washing over me. I had uncovered layers of meaning in a story that began with horror. In my heart, I hoped that through understanding we could find healing. I submitted my manuscript to several publishers, eager to share what I had learned with the world. And as I waited for a response, I couldn't shake the feeling that perhaps Jacob had been right all along. The light, whatever it truly was, remained a mystery, beckoning us to explore the depths of our existence and confront the shadows that lie within. Log 9 and Log 10. Months later, I received word that my manuscript had been accepted for publication. As the day of the book release approached, I felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation. Would the world understand the complexity of Jacob's story? Would they see beyond the monster and grasp the nuances of the human experience? On the day of the release, I stood before a small audience, sharing the narrative I had crafted. I spoke of Jacob, his mother, the victims, and the light that transcends our understanding. As I shared my journey, I saw faces reflecting a range of emotions: curiosity, sadness, hope. It was a reminder of the duality of our existence, the light and dark that coexist within us all. The conversation that followed was profound. Attendees shared their experiences, some recounting their brushes with death, others expressing their own struggles with loss. It was a cathartic moment, bridging the gap between horror and healing. As I concluded my talk, I realized that Jacob's legacy had transformed into something far greater than himself, a cautionary tale intertwined with a message of hope. In that moment, I understood that the light is not merely an end but a beginning, a journey we all embark on in search of meaning, connection, and understanding. Log 10 End. One Halloween, during a particularly vivid moonlit night, Mark decided to host a haunted Haddonfield event, a guided tour through the town highlighting its history, including the events surrounding Michael Myers. He believed that confronting the past was essential for the community's healing. The event drew an unexpectedly large crowd, with locals and visitors alike eager to hear about the chilling tale. Mark stood at the edge of the town square, the flickering lanterns casting eerie shadows as he recounted the story of that fateful night. On Halloween night in 1963, Mark began, his voice steady yet somber, the town of Haddonfield experienced a horror that would change its history forever. A 6-year-old boy, lost in his own darkness, committed unspeakable acts. While the film Halloween turned this story into a horror classic, the truth is much more complex. It was a tragedy, a family broken by violence, and a community scarred by fear. As he spoke, the crowd was rapt, their attention glued to his every word. Some gasped at the darker details he revealed, while others exchanged glances filled with shared understanding. They all felt the weight of the history Mark was illuminating, realizing that behind the fiction lay a painful reality. That night, as the tour concluded, Mark led the group to the old Strode furniture store, where his parents had first welcomed Laurie. Inside, he shared family photos, including a framed picture of Laurie as a young girl, eyes bright with innocence, unaware of the horror that would soon unfold. "This is Laurie," Mark said, holding up the photo. "She was a part of our family, a victim of circumstances. While Michael became a monster, Laurie became a survivor. We carry her story with us, even if she is far away." The crowd lingered, captivated by the stories of resilience and loss, and when the event concluded, Many expressed their gratitude for Mark's effort to bring light to such a dark chapter in their town's history. As they left, however, an undercurrent of tension hung in the air, as if the shadows of the past were not quite ready to release their grip on Haddonfield. After the tour, Mark began receiving anonymous letters, some supportive while others were threatening. The letters warned him to stop discussing the Myers family, claiming it would only stir up old wounds. They should be left in peace, one letter read, while another warned of dire consequences if he continued to expose the truth. Mark couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching him, monitoring his every move as he sought to uncover the hidden parts of Haddonfield's dark past. Intrigued by the letters, he started his own investigation, reaching out to local historians and interviewing residents. He discovered bits and pieces of information that were not commonly known, piecing together the fabric of the town's history. There were murmurs of a cover-up surrounding the Myers family, whispers of people who had vanished without a trace, and connections to other unsolved mysteries in the region. Each discovery seemed to deepen the enigma surrounding Michael and his family. One evening, after gathering stories and evidence from residents, Mark sat down with his parents. They looked concerned as he recounted the information he had gathered. "I think there's more to the story than what we've been told," he said, sharing the contents of the letters and the rumors he had uncovered. His parents exchanged worried glances. "Sometimes, Mark, digging too deep can unearth things that are better left buried," his mother cautioned. "The past is a heavy burden, and some secrets are meant to be kept." But Mark was undeterred. He felt a responsibility to honor Laurie's memory and the truth of what happened in their town. In his mind, he was not just confronting the past. He was giving a voice to the voiceless and exposing the darkness that had festered for too long. As Halloween approached again, Mark planned another event, one that would delve deeper into the darker corners of Haddonfield's history. This time, he invited local historians, authors, and even a few amateur ghost hunters who were intrigued by the supernatural aspects of the town. They would explore not only the legacy of Michael Myers but also the town's haunted locations and the stories that had been silenced for generations. As the event drew near, rumors began to swirl around town. Some residents were supportive, eager to confront the past, while others were vehemently opposed. On the night of the event, tensions ran high. The community gathered in the town square, where Mark introduced speakers who would share their research and personal experiences. The air was thick with anticipation, the full moon casting an otherworldly glow over the proceedings. As the evening unfolded, tales of paranormal activity, ghost sightings, and whispers of the Myers family's true fate filled the air. Mark shared his findings, weaving together the threads of history that revealed a deeper narrative, one that blended tragedy, resilience, and a community striving to heal. But just as the atmosphere shifted from tense to cathartic, a loud crash echoed from the shadows, causing the crowd to gasp. An object, a large pumpkin, had been thrown from the darkness, shattering against the pavement. Whispers of fear spread like wildfire through the gathering, and people turned to look for the source of the disturbance. In that moment of chaos, Mark felt a chill creep down his spine. The rumors he had heard, the letters he had received, were they more than just words? As the crowd began to disperse, he spotted a figure slipping away into the shadows, a fleeting silhouette against the backdrop of the town square. Determined not to let fear overwhelm him, Mark decided to follow. He raced through the darkened streets, his heart pounding in his chest, his mind racing with the implications of what he might uncover. As he turned a corner, he spotted the figure ahead, moving quickly but not fast enough to escape him entirely. "Wait!" he shouted, pushing through the growing dread that threatened to consume him. The figure paused, glancing back, and Mark's breath caught in his throat. He recognized the shadowy form. It was someone from the town, someone who had been part of the community for years. Why were they running? Just as he was about to call out again, the figure disappeared into an alleyway. Mark hesitated for a moment, weighing the risks. But curiosity and a sense of urgency propelled him forward. He entered the alley, heart racing, determined to confront whatever truth lay ahead. In the dim light, he spotted the figure crouched against the wall, breathing heavily. "Why were you hiding?" Mark demanded, trying to catch his breath. The figure turned, revealing a face that was both familiar and unsettling. An older man with a haunted look in his eyes, someone who had lived in Haddonfield for decades. "You shouldn't have brought it up," the man muttered, fear and anger mingling in his voice. "Some things are better left buried. You don't know what you're playing with?" Mark's mind raced as he tried to process the man's warning. "What do you mean? What do you know about Michael Myers and the real story?" The man shook his head, his expression pained. "There are secrets in this town, dark secrets. People don't forget what happened and they don't want to be reminded. You're poking a bear, Mark, and it's not just a story anymore. Before Mark could press further, the man turned and ran, disappearing into the shadows, leaving Mark standing there, breathless and bewildered. What had he uncovered? What was the truth behind the man's warning? Haunted by the encounter, Mark returned home, grappling with the weight of his discoveries. The chilling truth began to dawn on him. The story of Michael Myers was not just a horror tale, it was intertwined with the very essence of their community. The darkness that had seeped into their lives had left scars that time couldn't erase. As Halloween approached once more, the town of Haddonfield stood on the precipice of something monumental. Mark realized that it was time to confront the shadows head-on, not just for the sake of his family's legacy but for the entire community. The truth was out there, lurking in the dark, waiting to be discovered. And as the moon hung high in the autumn sky, he vowed to uncover the real story behind John Carpenter's Halloween, embracing the blend of history and horror that defined their town. He would expose the truth and shed light on the secrets that had festered for too long, daring to face whatever might lie beneath. Stalked by the Bride of Dracula. I always thought Halloween was just a chance to dress up and have fun. But that night, I learned the hard way that some costumes hide secrets far darker than mere fabric and makeup. The party was in full swing when I arrived. Music pumping, laughter echoing through the halls, and a haze of cheap beer and excitement filling the air. I felt out of place, a wallflower in a room full of vibrant colors and loud laughter. My friend insisted I needed to socialize, but all I wanted was the comfort of my own space. I was perched awkwardly on a couch, trying to blend into the corner when she walked in, a striking woman dressed as the Bride of Dracula, her glossy red lips glistening under the dim lights. She approached me with a confident smile that instantly captivated my attention. "Mind if I join you?" she asked, her voice smooth and inviting. I was taken aback but managed to respond. "Sure." As she sat down, I couldn't help but notice how effortlessly beautiful she was. Despite my introverted nature, our conversation flowed effortlessly. We talked about everything and nothing at all. It was as if we were the only two people in the room. But deep down, a voice warned me that something was off. Maybe it was the way her eyes seemed to flicker with a hint of mischief, or how she leaned in just a little too close. But the thrill of the night and her enchanting aura clouded my judgment. Before I knew it, we were outside, the cool night air wrapping around us. She grabbed my hand, pulling me along with an intensity that made my heart race. "I have something better in mind," she said, leading me to an old, rickety house at the end of the street. "What? Is this actually where you live?" I asked, a twinge of hesitation creeping in. She didn't answer, instead yanking my arm and pulling me up the stairs behind her. She pushed the door open with an almost eerie grace, and I felt a strange sense of unease wash over me. I wanted to turn back, but curiosity overwhelmed my instincts and I followed her inside. The basement was dimly lit, filled with flickering candles that cast long shadows on the walls. It was as if she had planned this all along. The room was set up like a ritual, candles burning low and creating an intimate, yet foreboding atmosphere. My heart raced with a mix of excitement and dread. "Wow, this is something," I said, trying to lighten the mood, but she merely smiled, a knowing look in her eyes. Before I could gather my thoughts, she pulled me in for a kiss, her lips soft and warm against mine. The kiss deepened, igniting a spark of passion I hadn't felt in years. I didn't know how to react as she shoved me back onto a large bed in the center of the room. In a whirlwind of movement, she bound my wrists to the headboard with cloth and rope, her eyes darkening with desire. "Wait, what are you doing?" I stammered, half excited and half anxious. She laughed softly, her breath hot against my ear. "Just trust me. You'll love it." It had been some time since anyone besides myself had touched me, so I decided to go along with it. As she moaned and let me rock her back and forth, I wished that she had let me undo her costume a little, so at least I would have something fun to look at other than her face. But I was still enjoying our time together, and it surely sounded like she was too. After what felt like an eternity of passion, she suddenly pulled back, her expression shifting to something more serious. "Thank you. You're mine now," she whispered, and then before I could react, she leaned down and bit into my neck. The pain was sharp but brief, followed by an intoxicating rush. I felt lightheaded, almost euphoric, as she licked the blood from her lips, a wicked smile spreading across her face. I didn't know what was happening, but I felt a strange connection form between us. I woke up alone in my bed the next morning, disoriented and confused. My wrists were sore and bruised from where she had tied me to the headboard. Rubbing my neck, I immediately searched for signs of what had happened. I rushed to the mirror, analyzing my neck closely. The bite marks were barely noticeable, but I knew they were there. A chill ran down my spine as I recalled her words. Later that morning, I stumbled into the kitchen where my roommate, Ryan, was already having breakfast with a girl he must have brought home from the party. "Hey, did you know that girl I was talking to?" I asked, still feeling dazed. Ryan laughed, looking up from his plate. "No, but she must have made quite the impression on you." "I'm not kidding, man. She bit me. Look at these teeth marks on my neck," I said, trying to sound serious. He laughed again, shaking his head. "Really playing into the vampire thing, huh?" I was growing increasingly annoyed. "No, seriously. I think she dosed me or something. I don't even remember how I got back here." That night, as I lay in bed trying to fall asleep, I had a strange feeling that someone was watching me. It was like an itch I couldn't reach, driving me nuts. I got up and went to the window, pulling the curtains back, only to find the Bride of Dracula standing outside my window. My heart dropped and I fell back onto the floor in shock. "Open the window and let me in," her voice echoed in my mind as if she were speaking directly into my brain. I screamed and shut the curtains, my heart racing. But she kept tapping on the window all night, her soft knocks sending chills down my spine until just before sunrise. I didn't know what to do. I thought I had escaped her, but it was clear she was relentless. Every night, I would feel that itch, that paranoia creeping in, and when I looked out the window she was always there, waiting. The days turned into a blur. I started avoiding my friends, not wanting to explain why I was so on edge. My roommate, Ryan, seemed to notice my change in behavior, often teasing me about my vampire girlfriend. But one evening, as I was pacing the living room, contemplating my next move, Ryan came home with an air of excitement. "Dude, you won't believe who I ran into at the bar." I sighed, bracing myself. "Who?" "Guess." "The Bride of Dracula." My heart sank. "What do you mean? You saw her?" He grinned, oblivious to my discomfort. "Yeah, she was looking for you. Said you guys had a special connection and wanted to see you again. I didn't give her your number though. I figured it would be a bit much." A mix of relief and fear washed over me. "You shouldn't have even talked to her. She's not just some girl, she's dangerous." Ryan chuckled, shaking his head. "Relax, man. She seemed cool. You've got nothing to worry about." But I knew better. The Bride of Dracula was more than just a costume. She had a darkness about her that I couldn't shake. That night, as I lay in bed, the familiar sense of dread enveloped me. I heard the soft tapping on my window again and my heart raced. "Please just go away," I whispered, hoping she could somehow hear me. But the tapping persisted, growing more insistent. Summoning all my courage, I slowly crept to the window and pulled the curtain aside. She stood there, a dark silhouette against the moonlight, her red lips curled into a seductive smile. "Let me in," she pleaded, her voice like velvet. "No. I can't let you in," I yelled back, panic rising in my throat. Her smile faded, replaced by an intense gaze. "You're mine, Alex. You don't get to decide this." "I do." My instincts screamed at me to run, but my feet felt glued to the floor. I wanted to scream, to cry out for help, but I was frozen in fear. "I'll come for you every night until you understand," she warned, her eyes narrowing. "You can't escape me." With that, she vanished into the shadows, leaving me trembling in my room, utterly alone. From that night on, I lived in a state of paranoia. I stopped sleeping, afraid that the moment I closed my eyes she would take me again. I began avoiding my friends, cutting myself off from the world. The whispers of the party faded, replaced by the constant thrum of my own heartbeat and the looming dread of her presence. Weeks passed, and the biting fear transformed into a kind of obsession. I started researching vampire lore, trying to find answers, searching for a way to break whatever hold she had on me. I learned about ancient rituals, protective charms, and ways to ward off creatures of the night. But deep down I knew there was no escape. Then one fateful night I heard a knock at my door. My heart raced as I glanced at the clock. It was midnight. I hesitated, my breath hitching in my throat. "Alex, let me in," came her sultry voice, soft. I knew it was her, the Bride of Dracula. I wanted to ignore her, but my hand trembled as it hovered over the doorknob. I couldn't keep running. I had to confront whatever was happening between us. With a deep breath, I opened the door, bracing myself for what awaited. She stood there, ethereal in the moonlight, her dark hair cascading around her shoulders like a veil of shadows. Her eyes glimmered with an unsettling mixture of hunger and affection. "I knew you'd come," she said softly, stepping closer. "You're mine, Alex. We belong together." I stepped back, heart pounding. "What do you want from me? This isn't right. I didn't ask for this." Her smile faded slightly, replaced by a look of hurt. You don't understand. I need you. You're different from everyone else. You can't just push me away. I don't want this. I don't want you. I shouted, frustration boiling over. The moment hung in the air, heavy with tension. Then, unexpectedly, her expression shifted, becoming more intense, almost predatory. You can't resist forever, she said, her voice low and alluring. You're drawn to me whether you admit it or not. I felt the truth of her words creeping in. There was a darkness within me that had been awakened by her presence, a thrill I couldn't deny. But the fear outweighed the attraction. I won't let you control me. She took another step forward and I instinctively moved back until I hit the wall. You have no idea how powerful our connection is, she whispered, her breath hot against my skin. But if you truly wish to break it, there's only one way. What do you mean? I asked, my voice shaky. Her eyes glinted with a dangerous light. You must willingly give yourself to me. Only then can you be free from the torment of my presence. I hesitated, my mind racing. The idea of surrendering felt terrifying, yet a part of me was enticed by it. What would it mean to become part of her world? To embrace the darkness instead of fighting it? Think about it, Alex. This could be a beautiful union, she murmured, her voice silky smooth. We could be together eternally. My heart raced as I struggled to find the right words. I don't know if I can trust you. What if this is all just a trap? Her lips curved into a sly smile. Then you should choose wisely. The longer you resist, the more it will hurt you. I'll always be here, waiting in the shadows, watching. I felt trapped between two worlds, the life I knew and the intoxicating promise she offered. With a trembling hand, I touched her face, feeling the coldness of her skin, yet it sent a shiver of excitement down my spine. Is there no other way? I whispered, the doubt creeping back in. She shook her head, her expression growing more serious. No. Only by surrendering can you find peace. I took a deep breath, battling the whirlwind of emotions inside me. If I do this, what will happen to me? She leaned in closer, her lips brushing against my ear as she spoke. You'll become something greater. You'll experience the world in ways you never thought possible. Embrace the darkness, Alex. Embrace me. With that, I made my choice. In the following weeks, my life changed dramatically. I embraced the darkness that had once terrified me. I found myself drawn to her, to the thrill of the night and the alluring power she offered. Together, we roamed the city, feeling alive in a way I never had before. The transformation was intoxicating. I felt myself becoming more confident, more powerful. But as I delved deeper into this new world, I also sensed a part of me slipping away, the light that once guided me dimming with each passing night. One evening, while we sat on a rooftop overlooking the city, I asked her, "Is this all there is? Will I ever be free again?" She turned to me, her eyes sparkling with a mixture of sadness and longing. Freedom is a state of mind. You have to decide what truly matters to you. This life can be beautiful, but it comes with a price. What price? I pressed, fear gnawing at my insides. She paused, the weight of her words hanging in the air. You'll never be able to return to the life you once had. You will always be part of me, part of the darkness. Are you ready for that? I felt a pang of regret, a longing for the simplicity of my old life. But as I looked into her eyes, I also felt a fierce desire to remain by her side, to keep exploring this thrilling new existence. I am ready, I finally replied, though uncertainty still lingered in the back of my mind. As time went on, the nights became our playground. We danced beneath the moonlight, losing ourselves in the rhythm of the dark. I learned to harness the power that coursed through me, feeling more alive than ever. But with this newfound existence came the reality of our choices. The longer I remained with her, the more I lost touch with my humanity. Friends and family became distant memories, replaced by shadows and whispers of a past I could never reclaim. One night, as we roamed the empty streets, I felt a strange pull in my chest. Is this really what I want? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Do you want to go back? She asked, her gaze steady. I'm not sure. I trailed off, lost in thought. Don't doubt what we have, she urged, stepping closer, her presence overwhelming. This is your reality now. Embrace it. But deep inside, a flicker of doubt ignited. What had I sacrificed in exchange for this thrill? As the weeks turned into months, I felt the weight of my decision pressing down on me. The darkness became suffocating, and I realized I couldn't escape the consequences of my choice. I had become trapped in a cycle I couldn't break. Finally, one night, I confronted her. I need to leave. I can't keep living like this. Her expression darkened, anger flashing in her eyes. You can't just walk away, Alex. You're mine. I was yours because I wanted to be. But now it feels like a prison. She stepped back, hurt evident on her face. You were meant for this. You're stronger than you think. I felt torn between the connection we had forged and the longing for my old life. But I've lost so much already. I can't lose myself completely. Then you need to choose, she replied, her voice cold. You either stay with me or face the consequences of your choice. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding as I made my decision. I'm leaving. In that moment, I broke free from her grasp and fled into the night. My heart raced as I ran, the city blurring around me. I could feel her presence fading behind me, the darkness retreating as I ran toward the light. Finally, I collapsed in a park, gasping for breath. The moon shone down, illuminating the path ahead. I knew I had escaped her clutches, but at what cost? Days turned into weeks and I slowly began to rebuild my life. I reconnected with friends and family, trying to remember what it felt like to be human again. But the memory of the Bride of Dracula lingered in my mind, a haunting reminder of the choices I had made. And though I had escaped her, a part of me still felt the pull of the darkness. I realized that once you dance with the shadows, they never truly leave you. As Halloween approached, I found myself looking over my shoulder, half expecting her to appear. I never did see her again, but the connection we had forged haunted me. The darkness was always there, lurking just beneath the surface, a reminder that I could never fully escape. The lesson I learned that Halloween night was that some choices come with eternal consequences. I might have escaped the Bride of Dracula, but I would carry the scars of that encounter with me forever. The darkness had become a part of me, and I knew I would never forget the thrill of dancing with the shadows. My dad started an affair with my mom's sister after she passed away, and then tried to kick me out of the house. Now, a week later he realized he made the biggest mistake of his life. This is going to be long and complicated, but I need to vent. So much has happened to me in the past few months, and I don't know if what I'm doing is right, and I feel very alone. I'm 17 years old and I live with my dad. My mom passed away less than a year ago. She was sick with cancer for a long time before that. I think she had been in and out of the hospital since I was 13. The last few years have been really hard for us as a family, and since Dad was the only one supporting the household, I had to take on the role of my mom's primary caregiver. Sometimes her sister, my Aunt Edna, who's 38, would come and help, but mostly it was just me and Mom. I did my best to take care of her, and I would do it all over again without complaint. I miss her so much and it feels awful not to have her around. It's been a while, but I still miss her. There's not a day that goes by that I don't lie down at night and talk to her, telling her about my day. I just can't forget her, even though everyone around me seems to have done so. Sometimes it feels like she never even existed. The same can't be said for my dad. I don't know why, but he's changed so much. It didn't take him long to move on after Mom. He removed all her photos, doesn't talk about her, and keeps no mementos of her with him. I don't know why he's like this because I always saw them deeply in love since I was a kid. It was just the three of us and our house was filled with so much love and happiness, and then Mom got sick and suddenly it all disappeared. I remember that toward the end, Dad became very irritable and moody, and I shouldn't say this or feel it, but it seemed like he was just waiting for her to die. He started staying at work longer and avoided being around her. It was horrible to see, but thankfully Mom was too tired to notice and understand that her own husband was ignoring her. I did my best to fill his shoes, but I don't think I did very well. And then my dad did something no one could have imagined. He started dating Edna just weeks after Mom's death. I don't think I've ever felt as much anger and betrayal as I did then, and I don't think I ever will. How could he move on so quickly? Mom and he had been married for 20 years. How was it so easy for him to just replace her with someone else, and not just anyone but her own sister? It was disgusting. My dad told me he didn't expect me to understand right now, but I would when I was older. But for now, I just needed to respect his decision. I told him I hated him and would never respect his decision to be with his dead wife's sister. I asked him how it was so easy for him to move on so quickly, but he didn't say anything. I had a huge fight with him where I called him all sorts of names, but all he could say in his defense was that one day I would understand his position. I told him he was disgusting and that I hoped I never turned into a man like him. I know I hurt him with my words, but I wanted to. I wanted him to feel the pain I was feeling, the pain Mom would have felt. She would be heartbroken if she knew what was happening just months after her death. It was vile and disgusting, and everyone made me feel like I was the villain for not accepting their relationship. Even Edna tried to talk to me, saying I should be happy that this was happening in the family so she could help me move on better. I wanted to slap her at that moment. I told her that this wasn't a breakup I needed to move on from, it was my mother we were talking about, and I would never move on from her death. I also told Aunt Edna that just because she had replaced Mom and Dad's life didn't automatically mean she could do so in mine. She told me she didn't want to replace anyone, just start a new family. I told her I wasn't interested in a new family. My family was my mom and dad, and if he chose to have a new family with her so soon at the expense of Mom's memories, I didn't want to be part of this family. Both of them tried to convince me multiple times, but I refused to give in. It got so bad that I used to lock myself in my room all the time and only came out to eat or go to school. I shut down all my dad's attempts to talk to me, and eventually he stopped trying altogether, so it was like we were at a deadlock in the house. We didn't talk to each other and just stayed away from each other. It was toxic and suffocating, and I know Dad was hoping I would give in so he could force me to accept their relationship, but I stood firm. I couldn't allow this, and I know he didn't need my permission to do anything, but I knew I could never accept something like this, especially so soon. I thought this was the lowest he could fall, but he completely surprised me about a month and a half ago. My aunt and my dad's new girlfriend moved into the house. Things hadn't normalized between Dad and me by then. He didn't tell me what he was doing and didn't give me any warning. I just woke up one morning to a lot of commotion and saw Aunt Edna with suitcases and boxes. I asked her what was going on, but she didn't say anything and just went to her room. I went to see Dad to ask him what was happening in the house, and his only response was, "Oh, now you want to talk to me?" I wanted to punch him at that moment, but I knew I couldn't. It was revolting. I knew what was happening, but I just didn't want to accept it. This evil woman wasn't satisfied with just having taken Mom's husband. Now she had to take over her home and memories too. Every second in the house after that felt like someone was strangling me. I couldn't stand being around them. I had quietly moved most of Mom's belongings to my room, and that was my only comfort. I knew that if Aunt Edna got the chance, she would throw away or discard Mom's things the moment she had access to them. She even tried to do it. She asked Dad several times where Mom's things were, and Dad kept saying I had them in my room. She's tried to enter my room several times on one excuse or another, but I just don't let her in. I can't stand having her in the same space as my mom. Even when I go to school, I lock my room so she can't get in and mess with my things. I just want to be able to leave this place. Things changed 2 weeks ago when Edna's daughter, Rachel, 19, came home. Now, Rachel and I have had a pretty good relationship. We're close in age, so we spent a lot of time together growing up. It was like I had a real sister. But then Mom got sick and I spent most of my time taking care of her, so Rachel and I drifted apart a bit. We kept in touch, but we weren't as close as we used to be. Aunt Edna moved Rachel into the house 2 weeks ago. I was kind of happy to see her because I felt like now I'd have someone to talk to, but Dad said that since there wasn't enough space in the house for 4 people, I needed to stay at a friend's house for a couple of days until they figured something out. I looked at him in disbelief. I asked him if there wasn't enough space for 4 people, which there really wasn't, why did he allow Rachel to come here? He said Rachel was in trouble and it was our duty to help her. I said that I was also his family just like Mom, but he had no problem abandoning us the moment Aunt Edna came into his life. He didn't say anything about that but told me I had to compromise and stop being difficult or he'd be forced to take action. To be honest, nothing this man does really surprises me anymore. He has fallen to such a horrible level that I now expect him to be disgusting. Anyway, I wasn't worried about myself. I really could have stayed at a couple of friends' houses. I was worried about Mom's belongings. I knew that, in my absence, Aunt Edna would try to do something with them, and I wouldn't be able to stop her. Dad doesn't care enough about either me or his dead wife to stop Aunt Edna. I was heartbroken over Mom's things and just didn't leave. I went to my room and locked myself in. Edna kept knocking on the door a couple of hours later, asking me to come out so we could talk, but I just ignored her. I didn't leave my room that day. I was mortified by what could happen and my paranoia reached new heights. The next day, I woke up quite early, locked my room, and went downstairs to the kitchen to get something to eat. To my complete surprise, Dad was sleeping on the couch waiting for me. As soon as he heard me, he got up and said he wanted to talk. I told him I wasn't interested. I tried to grab something from the fridge and run back upstairs, but he blocked my way. I tried to push past him, but it didn't work. He told me straight up that I had a week to move out because they couldn't keep housing me anymore, and that he was choosing Rachel over me because I was an insufferable, ungrateful little girl who didn't appreciate what he was doing for me, so he would simply stop doing it. He said that the most he would do, out of the kindness of his heart, was to send me some money for expenses, but that I needed to go and make room for his new family. Tears were streaming down my cheeks. I didn't even recognize this man. I thought I had only lost a mother, but that was when I realized that my other parent didn't even see me as his daughter. To him, I was just a person, or rather a burden he could remove whenever he wanted, and I knew I was powerless against him. I couldn't do anything. I had to listen to him because at the end of the day this was his house, and he was the one feeding and taking care of me, and he didn't owe me anything. At any moment he could just choose to stop supporting me, and I had to accept that. Anyway, I'm about to turn 18, so he can use that as his excuse too. I know it's favoritism and hypocrisy because he's willing to house and support a 19-year-old Rachel but not his own child. I don't know what's happened to him, or maybe he's always been this way, just a selfish, disgusting human being, and it only took this tragedy and trauma for me to see him for who he really is. I didn't say anything and went back to my room and cried my heart out. I was being abandoned by my only living parent, and despite everything he had been doing to me over the past few months, it still hurt. We hadn't been speaking, and I was beginning to realize he might not care, but I still held on to hope that one day things would go back to normal and we could be father and daughter again. Clearly that's never going to happen, and I feel like a fool for even thinking it could. He doesn't love me, and he doesn't care what happens to me as long as he can stay with Aunt Edna. Nothing else matters to him. I didn't know where I would go or where I would keep all my mom's things. I was willing to keep only 2 pairs of clothes for myself, but I simply couldn't let go of any of my mom's belongings. They're the only fragments of her I have left, and I'll never be able to let them go, ever. A few hours later I heard a knock on the door. I didn't want to open it, but it was Rachel on the other side. She said she wanted to help me and that I needed to talk to Grandpa, my mom's dad, as soon as I could. Then she slid a letter under my door. I didn't trust her. To be honest, I know she's a good person, but it's been years since we had any real contact or bond, and at the end of the day she's her mother's daughter, and her loyalty lies with her mother and no one else. So I was very skeptical, but I was also out of options, so I decided to talk to Grandpa. I mean, how much worse could things really get than they already were at this point? I called my grandpa. He lives in another state, and I started crying my heart out on the phone as soon as I heard his voice. He asked me what was wrong, and somehow I managed to form coherent sentences to tell him what was going on. It took me a long time to go over the details, and I also told him that it was Rachel who asked me to contact him. He said he was very happy to hear from me and that he had actually been asking my dad to have me call him for a few months, but Dad kept saying I wasn't interested in talking to him. He wanted to call me, but he'd lost his phone and all his contacts, and Dad never gave him my number. He told me he'd take care of everything and that I didn't need to worry. He said he'd fly to my city as soon as possible, but I had to be very careful and not reveal this to anyone. He said he would keep in touch and that I didn't need to worry about anything, but until he came, I had to make sure to stay in the house and not move out. He said he'd try to be here by next week, but if that didn't happen he would let me know. He told me explicitly not to leave the house unless he came and to keep my mom's things secure and locked up. I felt both scared and relieved after talking to him. Relieved because I know he'll do something and either get me out or make my dad see reason, and also because it feels good and light to be able to talk to an elder. I've had to be an adult for so long, and I just want the luxury of being a kid for a while. But I was scared too because I really didn't know what would happen. Everything feels so serious now, and Grandpa has always been the cheerful type. I know he lost his daughter, but I have my doubts that he'll stand up for me against his other daughter. Things just seem like a mess right now, and all I can do at this point is wait. I can only hope he comes and saves me from this disaster that my life has become. Update 1. Things have taken a drastic turn now. It all makes sense. I had no idea why Dad was acting this way before, but now that Grandpa is here and sorting things out, I understand what's happening. Grandpa came a week ago and asked to meet me. He sent me the address of the hotel he was staying at. He told me to gather all of Mom's belongings, and that he would send a car. I gathered my things and Mom's things and told Dad and Aunt Edna that I was leaving. Rachel was at work at the time. I went to Grandpa's hotel room with all the items, and he began to sift through them looking for something. He finally found what he was searching for. It was a document, but not just any document, it was the deed to the house we currently live in. Then he told me what was really going on. When Rachel and I were born, Grandpa had gifted each of us a house. Extravagant, I know, but he's loaded, as I've now discovered. He said he wanted to do something for us, and instead of setting up college funds he bought us houses outright. Now, the house that is legally supposed to be mine is the one we've lived in my entire life. The problem, however, was that since both Rachel and I were minors, the house was under the legal guardianship, for lack of a better term, of our respective mothers until we turned 18. I never knew about this, and I don't blame Mom at all since she was very sick, and it might have slipped her mind. Why Dad didn't tell me is a whole other question. Anyway, the houses were supposed to pass to us when we turned 18. Rachel's house was formally transferred to her name a year ago, a few months after she turned 18. It's the same house Aunt Edna and Rachel had been living in. Now, the issue with my house was that since Mom had passed away before I turned 18, the house would temporarily go to my other guardian, that is, my father, until I turned 18. This was what had been originally planned, and Grandpa suspects that Aunt Edna and Dad are conspiring together to get the house legally transferred to their names or simply to steal the documents before I turn 18, so I can't do anything about it. This is also why Dad never told me about the house, according to Grandpa, and it now makes sense why they kept trying to go through Mom's things, why Dad has been so distant, and why Aunt Edna suddenly showed up. I asked Grandpa what happened with Rachel's house, and he told me that as soon as Rachel realized what her mother was scheming, she kicked her out of the house. It caused a major rift between mother and daughter, but they haven't been seeing eye to eye for a couple of years. This strikes me as strange because if that were the case, why had she come to live with us? Grandpa said Rachel was worried about me and even more worried because Aunt Edna had moved in with Dad. She had been in constant contact with Grandpa, and the two of them decided I needed to move out and know the truth about everything. That was the reason she had returned home, but nobody suspected it, and Aunt Edna thought she was trying to make amends. I asked Grandpa what we could do now as I still had a couple of months before turning 18. Then Grandpa told me that Mom had actually started to suspect Dad had plans for the house when she was sick. She also had a hunch that Dad was having an affair, but she didn't know with whom. I think it was Aunt Edna all along. That was when she called Grandpa and asked him to sit with her and change the guardianship details of the house. As it stands now, my dad is not the legal guardian of the house until I turn 18. Mom had, without his knowledge, changed the clause in the document and named Grandpa as the guardian. That was the document he was looking for, and that was the document Dad had no idea existed. So all his attempts to take over the house are in vain because he doesn't have guardianship over it. Anyway, I know this isn't the legal terminology for it, but that's how Grandpa explained it to me and this is what I understand. So, in essence, Dad no longer has any right to be in the house and Grandpa is going to do just that. He said he's decided to live with me in the house until I turn 18, and since he's the guardian for now, he's going to evict Dad and Aunt Edna. I was scared when he said that. I couldn't believe he had this kind of power over my dad, and to be honest, I wouldn't know what to do with it. I'm still a kid who lost his mom and has a troubled family, and I don't want to get tangled up in legal issues too. I've handed the reins over to Grandpa and I'm just going to do whatever he says. I'm too exhausted by what's been happening and I just need some peace. I told Grandpa I'd do whatever he said and he told me not to worry. I just hope these issues get resolved because I don't think I have it in me to endure any more drama or pain. I am completely broken and I just walked out. We confronted Dad and Aunt Edna. When they saw Grandpa and me together, they went pale. Grandpa just walked into the house. And Dad tried to protest, but Grandpa silenced him quickly. He had also brought his lawyer with him and I could see that both Dad and Aunt Edna were very nervous. Grandpa, without wasting any time, told Dad that he was the guardian of the property for the next few months and that he wanted to move in, so he was giving Dad a month's notice to vacate the place. My dad stood up and began yelling at Grandpa, saying he had no legal ground, and very harsh words were exchanged. My grandpa just showed him a copy of the new papers, the ones Mom had secretly made, and Dad's jaw dropped to the floor. He said this was a fraud and he didn't believe it, but Grandpa said that Mom had the right to change the nominee whenever she wanted, and she did, so Dad really couldn't do anything except accept it. Dad couldn't believe this had happened, and neither could Aunt Edna. Rachel was laughing. She genuinely seemed to be enjoying this whole collapse, and for the first time she came over to my side and hugged me. I hugged her back and thanked her for everything she had done for me. When Aunt Edna saw this, she realized that Rachel had gone behind her back to help me, and she grabbed her arm and gave her a direct slap in the face. She hit her hard, and the tough girl that Rachel is, she just started smiling and said she was now going to press charges. Aunt Edna sank to the floor crying. She kept saying Rachel was her daughter and couldn't do something like this, but I could see the hatred in Rachel's eyes. She isn't going to let Aunt Edna get away with it. Dad realized that this was turning into a big scene, and both he and his little girlfriend were on the wrong side here. He started to make amends. He tried to pull me aside and talk to me, but Grandpa stopped him. He said there was no need to talk to me now since he had made it very clear that his loyalties lay with Aunt Edna, not me. Dad said this was between father and son and Grandpa had no right to interfere. I told Dad that Grandpa does have the right to interfere and that I didn't want to talk to him anyway. Nothing he could say to me now would make any difference. Finally, all the pent-up anger came out. I called him every name I could think of and told him everything I really thought of him. I told him he was a failure as a husband and father, and therefore a failure as a man. I said he had a chance to make things right, to let us be a family again, but he was too greedy and selfish to want anything that eased anyone else's pain. I don't even remember half of what I said because I had no control over myself at that moment. When I stopped, everyone was silent. Rachel just took me upstairs to my room and stayed with me for a long time. I feel so grateful that I at least have someone who cares about me, my sister and my grandpa. I don't know what I'd be doing if they hadn't been here with me. I don't know what will happen next, but at least I know I won't have to fight this battle alone anymore. I know now that I have support and that I am not wrong for not accepting my dad's treatment of me and his complete disregard and disrespect for Mom's memory. Update 3. This will be my last update. For everyone hoping for a dramatic and emotional reconciliation between father and son, I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but none of that has happened. Rachel pressed charges against Aunt Edna, and Aunt Edna tried every trick in the book to stop her, but Rachel is as stubborn as they come. Grandpa has moved in and Dad has a month to move out. He's been trying to talk to me one-on-one, but I reject every attempt. Plus, Grandpa is keeping a close watch and Dad is genuinely afraid of him, so he's not trying anything. Again, we recovered all of Mom's things. They are safely stored in my room and I plan to return them to their place once Dad has left. I'll seal up Mom's room because I don't need a whole house to myself anyway. Many of you suggested I go to therapy to deal with everything that's happened to me. I haven't thought about it yet, but I think I will go. It's time to put these ghosts behind me. Grandpa has offered to pay for any sessions I need, and while I appreciate it, I don't know how I'll ever repay him for everything he's done for me. Maybe one day I'll have that kind of courage, but for now I'm going to focus on healing. Thank you to everyone who took the time to read this. Thanks for the DMs and all the support, but it's time to leave it all behind me.